Welcome to Talking with Tech. I'm your host, Rachel Madel, joined as always by Chris Bouguet. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
All right, Rachel, how are you?
I'm good. What did we do yesterday? We did something really fun yesterday.
We did something for the first time yesterday, which was a Talking with Tech live experience. So do you want to talk about it?
It was so fun. I'm still that energy you get after you do something really awesome. That was me. I woke up this morning and I was like, whoa, that was really cool. For you guys who don't know, who weren't there, Chris and I came together and we did a session where we basically, we did a little bit of pre-teaching about, fundamentals of AAC, presuming potential, snug, all of the things that's important for everybody to know. But then what we did is we opened up to the audience, and it was an interactive session where we basically asked people to submit questions in a shared Google sheet, and then we just started going through and we started answering them, but it wasn't Chris and I answering them. It was collectively answering. So people would come on, with their microphone or their video or both, and give potential solutions and strategies for questions that people had about various things. So it was super engaging. It flew by. The session was an hour and a half. And honestly, I felt like I could have done it all day. I don't know if you felt like that, Chris, but I was like, whoa, I could keep going because it was just such a high energy, and it wasn't like the normal presentations that we give, Chris.
No, it was totally crowdsourced, and it was, the Google form was real easy. It's one or two questions. Oh, it really was just one question, what's your question, right? And then we didn't really have much of a slide deck because the entire presentation was us kind of just reading a question and kind of throwing it out. And we did, of course, because it's you and I, we gave our input, right? We answered the questions too, but it wasn't like the Chris and Rachel answer hour. It was the Chris and Rachel ask the questions and we all answer it together hour. I guess it was actually longer than an hour, but it doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? It was just this great, I felt the same way, that there was this buzz about it. And this was the first time we did it, it was for the state of New Jersey. So the New Jersey Assistive Technology Services, I think that's what it's called. NJATS is what it's called. NJATS. And Mike Murata puts it on, and he invited us to do a session, and we said, what about this? And if you've heard of Mike Murata at all, Mike Murata does helps facilitate ed camps, and this is very much a ed camp style sort of thing where it isn't one person presenting. It is again a crowd shared discussion, and it was just such a rich discussion about very pertinent topics. I mean, what were some of the questions that came up, Rachel?
One was actually about AAC for eye gaze users via virtual learning and telepractice, which is kind of ties into our interview today. But that was a really great one. And that was my favorite, Chris, because what happened was someone came on and, asked the question. And then another person came on and was like, I have an AAC eye gaze user that's very similar, it sounds like, to, the student you're working with. And so they both collaborated with one another and had a really awesome discussion that we were kind of flies on the wall, I feel like, at that point, Chris, just watching them collaborate with each other. And it was just it was so great. It was so magical. I loved that. That was my favorite part. I mean, there was amazing discussions about coaching strategies and getting team buy-in and, all of these other areas where we kind of struggle, in the field with these roadblocks. We all have very similar pain points and struggles and roadblocks in our practice. And it was awesome because, some of the solutions I would have never thought of. And I was like, oh, wow, this is awesome.
One of the questions, I think it's a big, very hot topic, is how do you help facilitate the conversation with BCBAs and those two different practices and how we can help teach a language and bring ourselves together. And so there was a crowdsourced answer where everyone was giving their perspectives and giving their what strategies they've used to facilitate those conversations. And it was just... It was off the charts awesome.
Yeah, no, it really was. And the other thing I loved about it was, so essentially you submit a form with a question, and then we gave you access to the responses, and people were able to type in real time answers to those solutions. So not only were we getting people to come on the mic and discuss strategies and solutions and tools, but also simultaneously, everyone else in the audience was filling in this spreadsheet with answers and links to resources. And it's a document now that people have access to. So it's kind of documented the entire session in a way that's really useful and practical to, us clinicians in the field who need those tools. They forget, like they're like, oh, they talked about this website. You have a document that you can go back to and refer to. And I actually, after the session, Chris, was going in and I was filling in some more answers to some of the questions that we didn't get to, because unfortunately we had a lot of questions and we weren't able to get to all of them. But don't you worry, we're going to try to answer those, on the podcast, slowly but surely. And I'm really excited because we have a few more of these booked for this fall, Chris.
We do. The very next one coming up is in November, and it's at the Access to Education Conference, which was supposed to be live in Indiana, but now it's, of course, virtual. And, I've been going to this conference. In fact, we already have an episode from the last year when there was an episode where it was Kelly Fauner and Darla Ashton and a couple other people participated in a group conversation with me about coding and robots. That's this conference again in a virtual format, and it's open to the public. So I think it's, anyone can, it's not just people in Indiana. I think anyone can register for that conference and attend. So if this sounds something like it's something interesting that you'd like to be a participant in, you can. We can put all the information in the show notes of this episode.
The other thing that's really important to tell everyone is that even if you weren't able to be there, you're going to hear it, because the whole point of Talking with Tech Live is it's a recorded live podcast episode. So we're going to be airing portions of the session that we had on the podcast. So you'll get to hear the solutions. Obviously, there were a lot of solutions that we didn't get to talk about in the spreadsheet that we had people filling out, but we had a very rich live discussion about strategies and solutions to some of people's questions. So we're really excited to start airing those on the podcast so we can share them with everyone.
Awesome. So now one of the things that came out of that, particularly, you had mentioned the conversation about eye gaze, right? And you had said, well, you know what? I actually just interviewed somebody that we talked about eye gaze, and we right there in the moment we decided, hey, why don't we move that up in the release schedule, because it seems to be something that people are struggling with right now. I know I've heard about it before, where how do you teach someone to, and how do you model eye gaze in this distance learning environment, right? And you had just done an interview on it. So you want to tell us about your interview?
Yes. So I interviewed Kaylie Gustafson. She is actually in Southern California, which is awesome. Her and I have been friends on social media for a while, and I was posting about assessment, actually, because I'm in the process of creating a 2-hour course for virtual AAC assessment. So I was kind of crowdsourcing some pain points that people are finding when they're doing assessments generally via telepractice, but also specific to AAC if they're doing trialing and things like that virtually. And Kaylie and I started talking, and she was like, I have been doing a lot of work with eye gaze. And I'm like, wow, like you're speaking to me right now, because I feel like that's an area, one, where I don't have a ton of clients that I'm getting who are eye gaze users. So I'm not as practiced and experienced in that area. And two, like to wrap my head around how that can happen virtually felt like a lot. So Kaylie was nice enough to come on the podcast and give us all of her tools and strategies, and explain how you can set up a eye gaze device to be a participant in the meeting, so that you're able to then you're able to see what a user is selecting, and lots of other strategies, tools, websites, all really user-friendly for eye gaze and eye tracking. So I'm really excited to share this interview, because she just has so many tricks up her sleeve. And I definitely think it's an area where a lot of clinicians feel like they're struggling. I think eye gaze in general, people feel daunted by and are struggling. And that was in person. And now we're like moving everything virtually, and people were like, I don't even know where to start. So don't you worry, we got you covered. This interview with Kaylie will give you, at least the foundational things to think about, and to start trying in your practice to really help our eye gaze kiddos.
Awesome. So without further ado, let's listen to Rachel's interview with Kaylie Gustafson.
Here at Talking with Tech, we're excited to partner with Smiles for Speech. This organization provides children with special needs living in impoverished communities the intervention and resources needed to help children reach their full potential.
Smiles for Speech aims to provide long-term sustainable solutions for children worldwide. Their mission is to distribute educational materials, provide training to teachers and families without access to appropriate intervention, and to create global awareness on the importance of therapeutic services to support children in need.
With your help, Smiles for Speech will continue to broaden their reach in assisting children living in disadvantaged communities gain access to the therapy services and education they need to thrive.
To support this organization, you can sign up for their upcoming dyslexia workshop that will highlight the diagnosis gap present among Black learners. This workshop will be on October 10th from 8 to 9 Eastern Time. To RSVP, go to sfsvirtual@smilesforspeech.org. That's sfsvirtual@smilesforspeech.org.
Welcome to Talking with Tech. I'm your host, Rachel Mado, joined today by Kaylie Gustafson. Kaylie, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to have you here. Can you just start off by introducing yourself and telling our audience a little bit about you and what you do?
Yeah. So I'm Kaylie, and I'm a speech therapist, and I work in a school district in Southern California as a AAC specialist, and I've really gotten into eye gaze somehow.
So, Kaylie, you and I were talking via Instagram because I had posted kind of to everybody, listen, I'm creating a course on virtual AAC assessment. What are some of the roadblocks, challenges? What are questions that you guys are coming up with? And we sparked a conversation about AAC assessment virtually, and you started talking all about eye tracking. And as many of our listeners know, because I've already said this multiple times on the podcast, I'm not great with eye tracking. I have some experience, but definitely not a ton. And you agreed to come on and talk with me today about all the kind of hacks and tools and strategies that you're utilizing specifically for eye gaze during virtual learning. So can you just start off by talking a little bit about what your experience has been?
Yes. So just in general, the experience in the beginning, it was trying to figure out what systems were able to get that remote control access. Mm-hmm. So just on the top of my head, PRC, you can get that remote control access via Zoom. Mm-hmm. Tobii Dynavox with Snap and Core, but not Communicator 5. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of the beginning point for me in this whole experience. Just how can I get and model with my students?
Okay, so when you're saying modeling remotely, can you, for people who maybe don't know what that means, can you go into a little bit of detail about what that looks like?
Yes. Okay, so what does that look like? Basically, little step-by-step guide. You both need to have Zoom. It will not work on Google Meet because Google Meet you can't remote control. So
which is unfortunate for a lot of people.
Maybe it'll come out, but who knows? So Zoom, you have to. They log in to the Zoom meeting on their device, or let's just say the trial device.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is for your student who has an eye tracking system, you can then have them join the meeting with their system so that their system is a participant in the meeting.
Yes.
Correct? And then you screen share as that participant.
Yeah. I have them screen share their screen to me. And then I, as the therapist educator, request remote control. Mm-hmm. The parent or family member, whoever, accepts, and then I'm in. So I can do whatever I want on the device, and they can see my cursor. I can see their eye gaze, which we can talk about settings, and because depending on your device settings, you might not see their gaze. So we would have to turn that on to either a dwell where it's red, or pick a color. That way you can see where they're looking, and then see how they're following your model.
Okay, so you are able to then program and do the things that you need to do with their eye tracking system all virtually.
Yes.
Which is awesome, because I don't think a lot of people realize that. I don't think a lot of people understand that they have that capacity. So it's pretty straightforward. You just join the meeting as a participant through the device, and then they have to screen share. And then also, I think it's worth noting, or at least me asking, they probably have to share their audio. Correct? They have to share. It's called share computer sound.
You know what? You're right, but I have overlooked that.
I actually realized this today. I was talking with a colleague of mine who is trying to troubleshoot how she can hear the audio quality better with her student's device. And she's like, can I connect them? I was like, yes, they can join as a participant, but then they would have to share their computer audio, it's called share computer sound is the setting on Zoom. And that way you'd be able to then hear the computer or the device the same way if you were sharing YouTube and you were watching a video, that you'd be able to share the computer sound. So I'm really interested to see if you probably can hear the audio anyway.
Yeah, but you're right. It would be better.
Yeah.
Because of what I'm hearing is the external speaker.
Exactly. So then it would just kind of be streaming directly to you.
Yeah.
So you'll have to report back.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is like, we're all discovering these things. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been on like a Facebook group or like seeing some type of social media post. And I'm like, wow, I've been doing this for 6 months. And I never thought of that. It's like the smallest little things that can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like the podcasts and the presentations and the webinars and all these things that we're doing can be really helpful to just like inform our practice, because we're all trying to figure it out as we go along. So tell me a little bit more about the tricks and tips that you've learned.
Yes.
So now we know how to connect an eye tracking system, and you can get remote access. So you can start programming, which is a huge game changer, because a lot of the problems that clinicians are facing right now is like, if I want to change and reprogram or hide or mask vocabulary, then I have to like coach a communication partner through it, which in and of itself is a good thing to teach communication partners how to do these things. But sometimes you just want like quick access to change something right away, instead of having to go through the whole process of, coaching somebody through that.
I have a couple things with that. With Snap Plus Core, you can remotely edit. So you don't even have to be on the call with the student. With PRC or Unity system, Lamp Words for Life, if it's not the iPad, but the actual like eye gaze system, then you could remote in via Zoom to do the editing. But then also what we do in our district is we have backups of everybody's software. So then if like a parent emails or a teacher emails, they want this or that, then we just edit from our house. We have the backup on our computers. And then we do a no contact delivery, where it's either like at the front office and we just bring our computer there in their car, and then we hook up to our like iTunes and then transfer the file. So that's been really cool. And I'm glad that we have that backup.
Yeah. And so that's only possible with the dedicated devices through PRC, and no. So we do that for all, like, just speaking outside of eye gaze, for all of our like iPad users or other dedicated devices, we have theirs too. Gotcha. Okay. So you're backing up systems, or you have the backup of the systems, and then you're able to program remotely. And then how do you transfer it to the student's device? Do you have to have them drop it off and
so they, on the day that the vocab is done, they'll bring the device to the office, go back to their car, I'll hook it up to the computer. So it really only takes like 5 minutes, and then they're on their way.
Right. Which is nice, because it used to be like, I remember like having clients come and like sit in my waiting room while I was like, hold on, let me just do a few more things. So now I feel like all of the companies have kind of got their act together a little bit, and now we have some capacity to do more seamless programming. I do think it would be really nice if we kind of had remote access to our students' systems, and I know some of the companies are starting to think through that lens. There's different capacities for different apps and systems, but I'm hoping that this telepractice shift has inspired a lot of the other companies to start figuring out ways that we're able to program remotely. What else you got for me, Kaylie?
You wanted tips and tricks.
I sure do. Okay. I want all the tips and tricks.
We'll start maybe with device settings first.
Okay.
And then move into more of like materials.
Great.
Okay. So device settings, I usually turn on feedback button feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So either it like lights up, and that's just for me personally, but then it also helps the user know that they selected it, like even outside of COVID and social distancing.
So for people who aren't as familiar with eye
Yes.
tracking, what is feedback?
Okay, so feedback, what is feedback? So it could be a color that highlights, maybe it's an inverse color, so that when the user selects it, they know that they selected it.
Mm-hmm.
It just is really helpful to know down the line when maybe they're using a keyboard and they're spelling, but it's not clicking, and then they have to look up to see what they spelled, but then they hit another button. So we use feedback via touch with our keyboard, so it's important to have those same features when we're teaching our users with AAC. You could also have auditory feedback, which is like a little button click. I definitely turn those on, unless for another, maybe the user finds it annoying, but most of the time I have the auditory little click, so they know that they accessed it, and then the visual cue.
Right. So this is just visual feedback. I'm looking at this icon or word or whatever it is, and I've now selected it. It's some type of shift that happens. So visually, you're able to see, both the user is able to see they've activated an icon or a button, and you as the clinician are able to see what they've activated.
Yes.
Which I've actually been doing a little bit with my direct select clients using, there's an accessibility feature for iOS at least, where you're able to have like a little, it looks kind of like a dart board. Yeah. So that's really nice because I'm able to model, and kids are then able to see me model, because part of the problem with modeling is like, sure, I can stream my device, but children can't see what word I'm hitting. It kind of defeats the purpose in some ways. There's lots of kind of hacks around that. And I've definitely been using that guided access feature. It's called assistive touch.
Yeah.
So we can definitely link to that in the show notes, because I'm sure everyone's going to be like, what is that?
I knew about it before COVID, but then I remembered it, 5 months in.
I know, right? I was like, I have to tell you, I definitely knew about it, and I was racking my brain. I did a webinar for Cough Drop right when everything hit on AAC and Telepractice, and I was like, oh my God, how are people going to see? I was like brainstorming, how are people going to see my finger while I'm modeling? And then 5 hours later down a rabbit hole, I was like, oh, assistive touch. All right. So what are you showing me here?
Okay. So you mentioned modeling, so I'm gonna go off of that for a tip. I like using annotate, and then I just circle the word that we're working on, and that's in Zoom. So there's up at the top little menu bar, there's a little pen feature, and then you click it, and there's different ways you can draw, but I like the thick highlighter one, and then I usually do red. I don't know, preference.
I do red as well. I'm like, this is like going to stand out the most.
Yeah. And either I'll circle one or I'll circle like two. Okay, are we gonna go, or are we gonna stop? Gotcha. Do you want some more? Are we gonna do different? That's usually after I've already presented the items and then there was no response. So just another way to model without being there physically.
Amazing. What else you got for me? I'm really intrigued. So is this a presentation that you show to your staff?
Yeah.
Amazing. I know we're all kind of trying frantically to train everybody on like how we can do this, especially with our kids, because some people are like, oh, they're not a good candidate for telepractice. So it's like, oh, like baloney. Everyone can benefit from telepractice. It just might look a little different.
Yes. All right. Well, we've been talking about high tech. We could talk about low tech.
Let's do it. I think that's one thing where it feels more doable for some clinicians. They're like, okay, like I don't really know how to like plug all these wires in, but low tech is something that's a kind of low hanging fruit that is easy to send, easy to start right away. I know a lot of kids are waiting for AAC assessments, and that's something that I'm really recommending a lot of clinicians start right off the bat is like send a communication board or some type of visuals to just get parents used to using something to support communication. Eventually we can get to the high tech, but at least give kids something who are waiting, especially for those assessments.
This is a lovely visual.
I'm going to explain to everybody what I'm looking at, which is basically it's a yes, no, we'll call it a board. There's two options, and then you have yourself looking in the bottom left-hand corner for yes, and the bottom right-hand corner for no. And then of course it'll be inversed, right? When we're looking at someone, or the way that someone's looking is going to be inverse, like kind of like a mirror. So this is something that's really easy for, basic communication, that everybody can do this, it feels like. Are you sharing this on your screen? Or is that what they're looking at on
Okay,
their...
so yeah, let me just back up a second. So the yes, no, the student had it right below on their screen, on their side. So parents,
Gotcha.
Student had physical cards.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
This was just done with me trying to explain to others.
Exactly. This is what you do.
Yeah.
Let me show you 4 pictures.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, this is awesome. I love this. And this is something that's really, again, for kids who might be waiting for their system or to trial something, or in assessment, something that you can start right off the bat. I know when there's some challenges with access issues, a lot of people feel very overwhelmed. Like, I don't know what I could possibly do in this situation to get communication happening. So that feels like a really low-hanging fruit that would be really easy to implement. Let's keep going with the tips and tricks.
All right. My favorite, they're not really tips and tricks, but I guess to me, they're not tips and tricks, but materials.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of people are not sure what to do with their eye gaze users.
Yes.
Once they have them on the screen. I love boom cards because if it's clickable, they can interact with it.
Oh, well, that's awesome. So if it's clickable, your eye tracking users can activate it.
Yes. So there is a little asterisk to that. You need to be able to, you need to have Windows control. Most of the trial devices do have it. If you don't know how to do it, ask your rep, or most of the websites have a step-by-step, but you go into for example, Tobii has Windows control on their desktop, and you open it up and it says Windows control on the left. And then you turn it on. And then you actually have to turn it on again. I'm not quite sure why, but so in the bottom
technology quirk.
in the bottom right, you just right click, kind of over by your Wi-Fi. Mm-hmm. It's like a red eye. This is only for Tobii, and you just do enable. So you can toggle between enabling or disabling. You enable the eye tracking, and with a couple more. I mean, it sounds like a long process, but it's worth it. And once you do it a couple times, it gets a lot faster. You just enable that left click. Yes, sorry.
No, go ahead. Keep going. I didn't want to interrupt your train of thought.
No, you just, my last train of thought was you just enable the left click, because there's a billion other settings you can enable. I usually disable, or at least for my students, we're not on to scrolling and zooming, because sometimes it just gets too junky, especially the zoom. I'm like, whoa, it's a cool feature, but all of a sudden they're zooming in on random buttons, and you're like, how do we get back? How do we?
Exactly. We don't need to be this magnified.
No, we don't need to be this close. But the left click, and the world is at your fingertips. Boom is something I use all the time. Yes,
so
yes.
In order for it to be activated, again, we still have to go through the step of the eye tracking system being a participant in the Zoom meeting, correct?
Yes.
So that's the only way it works. You can't have an eye tracking user who's not connected to their device. It wouldn't work that way, right? Just confirming.
They have to be on their device. Yeah.
Yes.
Because they have to have the tracking bar.
Right. Okay, I know. Sometimes it's you have to think through these steps, and I'm like, wait a second. I feel like I'm going through the sequence of plugging it in. You have to go through the steps of this to figure out the technology.
No, it's all good.
Okay, perfect. So, but this does work when you have the system set up, which is awesome. Yes. Are there any other websites that you found are really helpful?
More general speaking, Google Slides.
Great.
Amazing. I just created a multiple choice. It's clickable. So I made it clickable by adding sound effects so that the teacher could hear which one, and it would actually light up too, or not light up, give you that feedback. There it is again. So hopefully that will help her with more curriculum-based measurements. And it's eye gaze accessible.
I have to tell you, I have to share a story.
Yeah.
Literally right before we hopped on here, I was seeing a kid. And are you familiar with the game Gassy Gary?
Yes.
Okay. So there's I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a PowerPoint version of this game that is clickable with a clickable spinner and like a clickable fart button. And it is so fun. And like, I have to tell you that like my kids have been loving it this week. I think it's by this, I forget what her name is. We'll definitely link.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
She has a lot of really great clickable PowerPoint games. She's basically converted every like fun speech therapy game into a PowerPoint like slide, which is so awesome. So this is great to know that eye tracking also works with PowerPoint and also Google Slides.
Yeah, but you need to basically make it a button.
Right.
Make it act like a button. So give it some feedback.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, okay. What else we got?
Animated shorts. Those are always great.
Love animated shorts. I actually have a huge playlist on my YouTube channel of animated shorts.
I used your playlist video link right here. This links to yours.
Amazing. I don't know if you've seen Kaylie, but we've updated it. So we have like, I think 10 new animated shorts at the bottom. One actually we just shared with our Patreon. It's this video. What is it called? It's with this cute little puppy. And basically this puppy goes around and he pees in a school and this janitor's like chasing him around. My kids were rolling on the floor laughing. They thought it was so funny. And I'm talking like 3-year-olds, like to like 5th graders. Like this like animated short can be used with so many different.
That's why I love them.
Exactly. It's just so great. So we'll definitely link to that playlist as well, because it's just like such a great one. I feel like I've definitely curated it over the years, and I'm super excited because all of the new ones, there's like a bunch of new ones. You'll have to check out the bottom because there's a bunch of new ones that are really great.
Other favorites, Help Kids Learn. That is not free though.
Yeah.
You got to pay for it. So
is it worth paying? $1 million question.
Yeah. Especially when you have a user that you just can't find anything that's exciting or motivating. All of a sudden they're awake.
Okay, perfect.
That happened to me. So they were pretending to be asleep, and then we turned on Help Kids Learn, and I don't even know what I picked. I think I picked the patterns because it had like fun music and wasn't really age specific because this user was older. And I initiated it by clicking because we were remoting in, and then they just like woke up and I was like, oh, you want to join us? So it was funny. Then we like got some engagement. Yeah. Then we got engagement. So
love that.
Well, and they've just,
Well, sometimes that's the hardest thing is like when kids just like, you just pull out like all of your favorite things and fancy games and bells and whistles, and kids are just like not having it. Oh man, that's like so hard. I also see that Help Kids Learn has high contrast, which can be really great for kids with cortical visual impairment, which not a lot of websites and games and things like that are. So I feel like that in and of itself makes it probably worth paying.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Especially if you need that high contrast. It's amazing.
Amazing.
Speaking of that, there was one more that I didn't include. Ian Bean. And then it's Free Sen ICT. I'm totally butchering that. But they have, they have like touch and scanning and all the different access methods, but I forget who shared this. It was on Instagram, and I was like, I forgot about this. Maybe it was Kristen, but I usually use the pop music because I have some older eye gaze users, and they can pick their favorite singer.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. So
right? Isn't it fun?
Yes. For all of our listeners, I'm looking at basically a grid of the funnest music: Ariana Grande, Demi Lovato, Pink, all of these really awesome pictures. And then I'm guessing when you click on it, it play a song.
So you click on it and you pick your access method. So obviously we're talking about eye gaze, so we want to go to the eye.
Oh, perfect. Wow.
Oops.
Girl, sit your hallelujah.
Yes.
And then it goes. So sometimes I do this for breaks, just to like break it up and have some fun.
I feel like I would do this with like all my kids.
Right? Isn't it fun?
Not just AAC users. This is like super fun.
So,
I love this. Is this a free website?
Yeah, it's free.
Stop it.
Yeah, I know.
See, I've heard of all the ones that you've shared up until now, but I have not heard of this one. So
this one's good. And then there's like Fields, Disney.
Wow.
I did this one the other day.
Oh my gosh, this is great. I love that it has like every access modality. That's
right.
Really, really helpful.
Touch, you can do that with your eye gaze user. I mean, your touch users. I was reading eye gaze. So you can set the dwell speed.
That's awesome.
And then look, you got that green feedback.
Love it. Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm gonna play around with this.
Right.
Sure. After
it's so fun for like assessments.
Yeah, this is really, really great. Well, I told you the whole like genesis of this podcast recording was I'm creating a course on virtual AAC assessment. And like, let me tell you, this is for sure going in it. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Okay. What else? What other tricks you got?
All right. Trying to think of like the best ones.
Yeah. I feel like that one's really great.
That one's my favorite.
The AAC specific ones, that are, because sometimes there's like, quirks with some of the other ones. And I just find that sometimes the remote access is not, it's just like finicky for whatever reason. It doesn't always, even though I'm like, this is clickable, you have remote control, I see it, but it just doesn't work for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Toy Theater. Have you heard of that?
I have, actually.
All right.
Yes. But hold on. Is this another one that, well, I guess if it's clickable, like your eye gaze.
Yeah, if anything's clickable.
Which, like, in some ways, it feels like this has really opened up the world for eye tracking users, because I feel like typically it's like, well, like, limiting, a lot of the activities that we choose. But for our eye gaze users, it feels like if it's clickable, which everything on the internet for the most part is clickable, we're able to do it. So I feel like in a lot of ways, my eye tracking users probably have more opportunities to interact with my screen and the games than some of my other direct select users,
Yeah.
Love, love, love. Okay. Last final tricks and games and tools.
Last final tricks. When in doubt, I pull up the YouTube videos with music. Mm-hmm. And then iPad games. If there's screen sharing, I can't screen share. Yeah.
But I'm finding that generally speaking, I'm doing a lot of sharing on my iPad because there's really motivating games where a student can direct your actions essentially through their communication.
Yes. I think that was it. I mean, I've configured some of my students' devices to do like, hey, Google, or what do you say to Alexa? Just Alexa?
I think it's just Alexa. You can say, hey, you have to say, hey, Siri.
Yeah. Hey, Siri. Yeah. Hey, Google. Oops, I just turned mine on.
That's a really good one for the family too, if they have like Alexa or something like that. And kids get really like a kick out of like asking Alexa or Siri questions. So that's a really fun one to integrate into your therapy too.
Have you seen this one, CrickWeb?
I have actually.
Okay, so it's CrickWeb. It's UK based, but it's free, which I love. And it's like pre-K to second grade-ish. I'm kind of just guesstimating because they use different like numbers over there for grades. But I really like this because it's clickable. There's choices. Mm-hmm. I just highlighted the writing one. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Writing nonfiction. So you pick like a robot and you pick a title, you pick a picture, and there's like a field of 3. Awesome. So I can see like where their eyes are, and then they can build like a little magazine article, which is so fun.
That's a really great one for like older students who are working on more literacy goals. Yeah. I love that. Oh, this is fun with the robots. Right? Yeah.
So they can pick a picture and then they pick their text that matches with all about the robots.
Love it.
And it highlights for that visual feedback, which I enjoy.
Yes.
Because then we know what they're choosing.
Exactly. That's amazing.
Right? Isn't that fun?
Yes. CrickWeb is definitely another really great one. There's so many tools out there, but I'm happy that you've shared some that I haven't heard of. And I know for a fact that all of these ones are really good for supporting language and communication and are really either free or inexpensive, which is really nice. And it's just like, who knows what's going to happen in the next year? I'm sure there's more websites and more resources now that we've kind of made a lot of shifts to virtual learning and virtual therapy. So it's really exciting to think about what's headed our way in the future as far as accessible games and toys and things like that we can use virtually. So I know that when we're doing a lot of virtual stuff, positioning and environment can be a huge thing. So can you just walk us through some of the things that you consider when you're working, especially with an eye tracking user, so that you can have optimal success?
Yes. So two things we're talking about: calibration and positioning. Very key. So when they get their device, let's just say it's delivered to their house for no contact drop off, or it's delivered to you, and then you drop off via no contact. Couple things to make note of when you calibrate. You want it to be a dark room. You want people who are with them to be standing behind them. Don't stand in front of them or to the side, because it can be really distracting. Don't cheer them on, because then the brain is great, but if you cheer them on, they'll look to the sound. So then you've lost an opportunity, so to speak. And then one thing that's really important is when you pick your symbol, or let's just say you want to upload a symbol, I would highly recommend not doing that. And there's like very specific cases where maybe you've tried the symbols on the device. Most of them have like smiley faces or circles or stars. They do that for a reason. So let's just say he chose a horse. You're like, well, they love horses. Well, the most like salient feature of the horse is the tail. So now we've got like our eye point on the end and not the middle. So that's just like a big thing that can throw off a lot. With calibration. And
just to clarify, so calibration is when you're setting the system so that it accurately catches the eye gaze.
Yes.
Right? So without accurate calibration, like it's kind of a mess, because it's not tracking exactly where the user is looking.
Yes.
And then when you're talking about the icon, for example, you could upload, a motivating, like you gave the example of a horse. You could upload lots of images, but knowing where the focal point of that image is really important, which is why the smiley face and the circle with the dartboard circle and things like that might be more optimal, because you can get a better, truer calibration. Is that right?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And okay. And I love all the things that you said about positioning. Also, do you have any tricks or strategies for the whole coaching piece of parents, and then not necessarily either not cheering on or giving them feedback? Because I know a lot of people, like when I posted that on my Instagram about assessments, and it was like so many people, when parents give the child the answer or tell the child what to do or point or activate it themselves. So is there anything that you found to be successful when you're coaching parents?
So I'll usually send them an email and maybe like, here's some tips. We're going to be really quiet when they do it. I usually use we as I'll say like, oh, I tried that one time. So I'll usually put it back on myself. Like, oh, I did this where I was cheering them on, and then in a previous student, and their eye gaze, it just didn't work well. So let's try that again.
Love it.
That I've found a lot of success with that, using we, and then like, oh, I did this. This is what happened. Let's try it again. So just kind of being
kind
light
of like,
with it.
Like throwing yourself under the bus. Like, trust me, I did that wrong before, and like now I know better. Really great strategy, actually. Because again, it's like we never want to make parents feel like they're not doing right, or they don't, know what they're doing, and to feel self-conscious or insecure. And so,
and with all the equipment, it's sometimes intimidating.
Absolutely, especially for eye tracking. Just like logging onto Zoom is challenging sometimes. So having to then log on your students' or your child's eye tracking system and give remote access and all of these things probably feels like a lot, but practice makes perfect. And I do think we have a really unique opportunity to coach communication partners during this time. And as much as it feels like so much work sometimes and frustrating and hard to kind of like troubleshoot, sometimes I feel like I'm like IT support and I'm like, like this is not what I want to be doing. Like I want to be teaching language. But we do have a really unique opportunity here to really coach communication partners and parents especially. And so I try to circle back to that every time. I'm like, oh my God, I can't describe how to program this button one more time. Like I'm going to like freak out. I circle back to like, no, Rachel, this is actually part of what we're doing and part of the process. So I think that's important to remember too.
And then the last part is positioning. One thing I'll just do like one tip for positioning because we could talk all day about it. But an example I like to use is I had this student who they were positioning their device in front of them thinking like, okay, we're going to put it in front of you and it's going to be midline. But they were off to the left and looking straight on. So they would have to come back to middle to access, which is like exhausting. So we want to follow our user's head and eye gaze, whether it's up, tilted, and you need a floor mount, it makes it worth it. Because eye tracking and eye gaze, it's hard enough. So we don't want to like add to the exhaustion.
I completely agree. I actually was working with a student doing a consult, and I was working alongside of another AAC specialist. So it was like, you never want to like step on toes or like do anything. You're like, oh, like, well, I wonder if we could do this. But this student was, the device was positioned so that he had to turn his head significantly in order to activate it. So he actually was pretty central with like his head. It was pretty stable. So they had the device off to one side. And the rationale was we want to make sure he's intentional with his selections. And I'm like, well, no, he's intentional if he like dwells long enough on, the icon or the button or whatever. And it was hard. It was hard for him to like constantly have to move his head in order to access the screen. And so that's a perfect example of how, really getting the positioning right is huge. And eye tracking is really hard. Like I'm sure you, Kaylie, have tried it. I've definitely tried it for myself. And it's like, oh my gosh, like my poor little eyes, like they get so tired. Yeah. And so it's just exhausting for our clients. And so just being cognizant of that. And also sometimes it's really hard to have volitional control over our head. So there's lots of different things that come to play. But positioning can make or break eye tracking in a lot of ways. Anything else you got for me? We did it.
Got it.
We did
got
it.
it all.
Well, thank you so much, Kaylie, for coming on and sharing all of your tools and strategies with us. I really appreciate you taking the time to share. A lot of people are feeling overwhelmed with telepractice in general, and then add on top of it AAC and telepractice, and then add on top of it eye tracking, AAC and telepractice. So I know for a fact that our listeners are going to be so grateful for these tips and these strategies that they can use in their practice. So definitely go follow Kaylie. We'll link to her Instagram on the show notes because I know that you share oftentimes some strategies and things like that on your social media. They're super helpful. So for Talking with Tech, I'm Rachel Madel, joined by Kaylie. Thank you so much for listening, you guys, and we'll talk to you next week.
Hi, I'm Mei Ling Chan.
And I'm Martin Sibley.
And we are the hosts of the Exceptional Leaders Podcast, where we spotlight high-profile topics and amazing people who are changing the worldview on disability.
Even though we are oceans apart, we are bringing people from all over the world together to discuss inclusion, advocacy, accessibility, and real-life journeys.
So listen to the Exceptional Leaders Podcast to hear the voices and stories from amazing changemakers and be inspired to make a real difference in the world.
You're listening to the Exceptional Podcast Network.